Hello, Adam Eason here. I'm putting a little note at the beginning of this video to let you know there were some audio issues during the recording of this video. Luckily, I was planning on including closed captioning for this and all future interviews anyways, so if there's anything that's a little bit hard to hear or is a little garbled, at least you'll have something to read on the screen. My interviewee this month is Casey Ray Parrott. He's been a good friend of mine for a very long time, and he's a fantastic artist. If you'd like to see examples of his work and what he's working on currently, I've included his name and website in the description below. I've also included the website of the school he used to teach at called My Possibilities. They provide continuing education for students with special education needs after they age out of high school, and they do some excellent work in the Dallas area. All right, that's about it. I hope you enjoy this interview, and I'll see you next time.
Fine. Okay. Hello, everybody. Right. This is Casey Ray Parrott, old friend of mine going back to good old college days. I guess they weren't all good old college days, depending on which days.
Some of them were terrible.
He is a visual artist. Mostly you paint, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as most of what I've seen. And I guess the first question, which is on everybody's mind, what do you think of Bob Ross?
I mean, there's some interesting stuff that he does. He's made the comment, I've created this so that no one has to paint all the little nooks and crannies in the rocks. I get it. But I also love painting the nooks and crannies and rocks. So,
sure.
Hey, I mean, to each their own. I love the guy, and when I needed a good nap, I'd watch his show.
Yeah, he had a good
Not because
voice.
of his work, his voice, exactly. His voice put me to sleep every time.
Yeah. So for my interviews, I've been starting from like literally the very beginning, and it seems like a pretty good place to start. Do either of your parents still have any of like your drawings that hung on the fridge?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. My I don't know how many my dad and stepmom have right now because they're cleaning out their house last I heard. But my mom has paintings and drawings since I was 18 months old. She said that's when I started drawing people, like heads and hands with fingers. At 18 months. I don't know that I believe her anymore, but that's what she says, and I'm gonna just say, thanks, Mom.
Yeah, sure. Oh, just 1 second. There's a technical thing. I just realized it's not my correct microphone.
Oh.
Boop. Okay.
Hey. There you go.
When, like, how far back is your memory for like your first things that you remember drawing?
Oh man. Pre-K.
Yeah.
I remember doing stuff in the daycare my sister and I were in. Actually, most of my cousins were in. We kind of took over the daycare. But I remember distinctly, the table where I sat and I would draw houses, trees, and, the typical houses and trees that everyone does at 4 and 5. But that's when I remember it.
Okay. Do you remember at all, like, what kind of things you were drawing? Was it just sort of what was around you, monsters?
Monsters. At that time, predominantly dinosaurs.
Okay.
And then Ninja Turtles. I've for the longest time kind of gravitated towards the non-human side of things. If I were to ever iterate some superhero version of myself, he was always some kind of animal.
Yeah.
So
this may be a bit of a reach. Do you remember at all, like, if you had encountered those stop motion dinosaur videos?
Oh yeah.
I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
So that was in your world.
That was totally in my visual DNA, man. I mean, I just love dinosaurs. And then I remember having a huge paradigm shift when Jurassic Park came out, because I thought, that's not how dinosaurs stand. That's not how they move. But wait a minute.
Yeah.
that's really cool. And so you could see the paradigm shift be affected even in my artwork, where I started thinking about actual anatomy and physiology as far as my figures. And figurative work was kind of the staple of all my sketchbooks because I didn't paint until I was 14.
Yeah. And Jurassic Park was mid 90s.
93. I was 8,
Yeah.
7 or 8. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And then, so you didn't paint until 14. I'm trying to think, because you went to Booker T. Washington High School, right? For high school?
Yeah.
Uh,
So I attempted a Bob Ross style painting on the outside of my manila folder to show the teachers during my interview that I could try to paint. I never really pushed outside of elementary and junior high art classes. I never sought to get extra education. So
okay.
it was a challenge, and even then I didn't like the way they taught me to paint. Though now I look back and think, dang, if only I'd listened then, I might be better today. Maybe.
I can relate.
Yeah.
What were classes like at Booker T?
Awesome. I mean, the art classes, the normal education we had to do because of national, federal and state mandates were. I had good teachers. Physics was probably the most enlightening as far as relating to art, though. I think it had everything to do with the instructor. But my art classes were hard because I'd always been allowed to just make my own stuff with no criticism, no interjections, no teacher, really. Even when I was in elementary and junior high, they're like, "You're so good, just do whatever." And I think that hurt me in the preparation. But when I got to high school, I mean, they said, "Nope, come on, you can do better." And there were people that were way better than me freshman year. And that was disheartening.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was creme de la creme, and I found out I was maybe 1% milk.
Yeah.
By the time I was, a freshman, and I got much better being in that environment. I mean, what was really cool is that there was no real competition between the artists in my classes.
That makes a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, you had people that were far superior technically and even in their expressions than most of the other class. And they were usually kind of shutaways. They didn't talk to a whole lot of people. But for the guys that were really good but still genial, huge helps, because then at that time we could build on each other and only compliment. And that's again another paradigm shift. It was incredible to have that.
Yeah. Do you remember, I guess, which art teachers from that time stand out to you now?
My painting teacher, who actually went to SMU, John Hernandez or Juan Hernandez, depending which culture he's in, he'll change his name. Cool guy. Sure. Ava Kuchide, who was my printmaking teacher. And just her introduction was really great. And then another painting teacher, George Mosley, who left after the first semester I had him. I think he had some internal drama at the school, but he didn't say much, but when he would come in on my still life and he would just say, "Why do you do that? Try this." The way he approached me, I mean, disheveled everything that I was doing and said, "Okay, I need to try this." Yeah. And then I really had to lean on his instruction of, "This is new to me. Where do I go?" He was like, "Just try it." Yeah. It was great. Yeah, I was like, "Sure thing, boss." Yeah. But then he disappeared, and we had like this litany of substitutes that just, they were subs. They weren't the same. So.
Were they mostly influential in their teaching approach, or were there stylistic things that you picked up from them that you can kind of still see today?
So I would say most of it's technical. However, I think John Hernandez definitely tackled something of stylistically when I was painting. He says, "Look, you have really good colors. I like this, but you need to stop blending," which is a technique, but but stylistically too, there's something about leaving brushstrokes that just helps magnify the painting.
Gotcha.
And I mean, when he said that, it really just kind of hacked me off. I'm like, dude, just leave me alone. But again, that's one of those things, looking back, like, I wish I'd held on to that, because it could have kind of jump started the way I paint now, maybe a little earlier. And then Nancy Miller and Charlotte Chambliss, who were both drawing instructors, drawing and design, really pushed me to work bigger and more loosely. I had this terrible habit of working super small and super tight, almost like a photograph. And I didn't know this, but when you do that, it makes everything kind of feel flat. There's no movement within the surface. And they really challenged me that way. And then Charlotte Chambliss really pushed more the finding a focus. Like, what is it? What narrative are you wanting to go at? What are you trying to evoke? How can we put emotion and thought? And I didn't have her until my senior year, so it was just kind of like, dang, I wish I had you more in my tenure here. But still, I gleaned a lot from her in the short time that I had her. She was great.
Mm-hmm. What about other students from the time? Have you kept up with anybody, or?
So there are a few people that I follow up with on social media, mostly Instagram. Like, there's one guy who was one of the cream of the crop, Jean Cuisson, born from France. So he just, he came with a heavy portfolio before anyone else. He's now doing like 3D painting with the VR technology.
Oh, cool.
And I think he's in the Pacific Northwest doing a whole bunch of album art, music. And then when he got into this 3D painting, I mean, the stuff he makes is trippy, but impressive. A couple of other people that I do keep up with don't make art anymore.
Yeah.
Majority of the people don't make art. They're just kind of in the art community and dabble, but
heavy attrition rate.
Yeah, sadly. I'm curious if that's in most areas of study or just ours.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems like a lot of the people I knew from high school who were in orchestra and were doing really well, they kind of stopped in college. And I think a lot of it just has to do with, I mean, they weren't going for a music major, and college sucks up all your time and energy.
Yeah.
It's sad. Like, you wish that people had more time to kind of play around with whatever creative endeavors they've got, but that seems to be kind of what happens for a lot of people.
That's sad.
Yeah, but I guess speaking of college, then, what drew you to Southern Methodist University?
I mean, throughout high school, I did the art thing predominantly. I mean, it's what I like to do, but it also got me out of my home high school, so I didn't have to do sports. I didn't want to do sports with anybody, just, a ton of insecurity. But then maybe about junior year, I started thinking, maybe I'll go under the mission field, and I'll just be a missionary for the rest of my life. But I'll go to this really cheap local Dallas mission school and go from there. And midway through senior year, I had my first kidney transplant. I'd suffered from kidney disease my whole life, and I had a transplant, which, I mean, man, when they talk about having brain fog disappear and a chemical rebalance, the world changes quite literally overnight. So my outlook physiologically became a lot more open. My ability to perceive became a lot clearer. And I thought, well, in the recovery time, I was watching a lot of the Lord of the Rings DVDs because they'd just come out with, the third movie had just come out in theaters. And so I was busy watching Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers, and all of the added DVD stuff, all the extra content, the design processes they went through, all the different galleries they exhibited. And I was just so jazzed to see this fantasy stuff. And I went through so many sketchbooks as I was downing barbecue chicken and gaining so much weight after the surgery. but I felt like that God told me to go to SMU. And I had one of those moments. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. Are these the drugs? Are these the new meds? You want me to go from the cheapest school in Dallas to the most expensive school into the state, and to do what now? And I just had this unction that it was art. And I thought, what? So that's what I did. I did a 180 and I applied maybe the last day that I could apply for SMU. Got in and then decided to major in art.
Yeah.
I think going to SMU, there was a lot more to learn through the college experience than just art. I think had I known about it, I might have gone to an atelier or maybe gone to a different school that really focused on arts, because SMU sends all of their art money to the museum and not to the school. So, and that's fine. I mean, that's their prerogative. But I think it shows. I think it shows. And even one of my professors said, you should have gone to, Art Institute in Chicago or something, which was a great compliment coming from that particular professor. But anyway, that's how I got there.
I landed in SMU almost by accident, so I'm kind of curious, like what SMU's reputation within Dallas is, like as a local, growing up there.
Let me put it this way: when I got into SMU, I found out, my best friend Matthew, who you also know very well, was going. And I don't know how we didn't communicate that before we both got accepted. But I started telling people, hey, so I'm going to SMU, fall 2004. So a lot of people say, that's great. What are you going to do? Like, I'm going to go for art, like painting. Painting like walls? And I would stop and think, wait a minute. You should be smart enough to know what SMU is, check. But you don't know what an art degree is. So I think most people think very highly of SMU. They look at the Ford Stadium, just the name SMU, and everyone's eyes kind of like, oh, wow, okay, you must be rich kind of thing. I'm like, well, strike two, I'm not rich by any means. I'm a poor kid from East Dallas. So I think people like the name, but there's not a lot of association with the art school there.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much that's changed really. And I think that's kind of the drawback that, my professor wanted me to go to a school where the art program was an immediate beneficiary of all income to the school. SMU that's just not their priority. Yeah. They have it and it's a good program. I learned an exorbitant amount and I had quality professors through and through. But you can tell that it's just not.
A little rough around the edges.
A bit. I mean, the maze downstairs was enough to say, you don't care about your student body.
It is interesting because, like, for people who don't know, the Meadows School of the Arts is kind of it's a central arts building that houses all of the arts, music, dance, theater, visual arts. I frequently ran into theater people, dancers, obviously other musicians, because that's what I was there for. We rarely saw you.
Nope.
Like the painters, sculptors. Yeah.
No, we were locked away in the old museum, because the old museum is what became the visual arts department. So a majority of our drawing classes and everything took place in the old museum rooms. And then you had one group of studios kind of clustered in the upper mezzanine. And the only way to those were through several locked doors. And then I lucked out on undergrad studio, and it was again behind several locked doors that faced the north side. Gotcha. And then if students weren't in there, then we were just generally locked up in the different studios.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everyone passed through our world to get to music and theater, but not so many stops.
Not a lot of interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not particularly friendly. As a whole.
Yeah. So from Booker T. Washington, you had already kind of had your pride bubble popped a little bit.
Yeah.
Did you encounter further frustrations with that going into Meadows
Absolutely.
from your professors?
Kind of right off the bat, we had to do a foundations class.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the office and said, hey, I'm from the Arts Magnet downtown. Is there any way that I can skip the foundations class? I've already done this for 4 years. And they immediately laughed at me and said, no, everyone does it. And then that was the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
I said, I can't apply for this. They said, no, you have to do foundations first, period. End of discussion. So that was a blow.
Yeah.
That was a big blow. But, I got sick first semester with, bilateral pneumonia and missed, 2.5 weeks of class. I'm glad that I had a foundations course. And I'm really glad that I went because, met some of our mutual friends who are still very dear to me today through that class. And one of my mentors who's still a dear mentor today through that class. And I learned a lot. It was a lot deeper in knowledge. There was a lot more exploration into the art world and what it meant to be an artist through that course than I'd ever received in high school. And that's not a knock on my high school teachers. I think that's just the nature of moving up in levels of education. I can say affirmatively that my art education was levels beyond what I went through in high school.
Yeah.
So there was that. I had 2 professors outright tell me I was lazy. And I was baffled. I thought I was just poor because I couldn't afford, like in printmaking, I couldn't afford a whole bunch of copper plates to keep trying different images. I was always trying to perfect and make the best masterpiece. And that wasn't the point. So he called me lazy. But when he saw the way I painted, he said, now I know how to help you print. And he led me into a method of printmaking that to this day, I wouldn't be a better painter without having gone through that type of printmaking. And the other was a ceramics professor of all things. I did a bunch of clay stuff in high school, but when I got into ceramics, that kind of rocked my world because we didn't have wheels in my sculpture classes in high school. That was just for ceramics. But I took ceramics because it pushed me. It helped me understand form a lot better and how to conceptualize form. And the same professor said, I like where your head is going, but you're very lazy. You need to put more work into this. And then the same professor who told me to go to a better school within the same semester, maybe even the same week, told me, you're better than I was at your age, but I wanted it more. And that messed with me because I'm like, wait, how do I want it more? I don't know how to do that. And then another time during one of our 6-hour painting classes, he said, if you only realized how asymptotic you were, you would no longer be an asymptote. I thought, so you want to explain that to me? And so he drew out an asymptote and he said, look, you are a parabola that is ever increasing towards the y-axis, but you will never cross it. But that's technically impossible, but I get what you're saying. But again, he kind of left me in that spot. And I'm really glad that he did because it pushed me to want to be better. And I'm at that place now, as I mentioned before we started recording. I'm at the place where I want it more, and I'm searching, I'm sojourning for how can I communicate that on my canvases or my surfaces.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there were a lot of deep life lessons that I learned from my art professors. That's like, they still haunt me in the studio, sometimes for my benefit, sometimes to my detriment, because I get hung up on what was said. instead of using that as fuel to go forward. Yeah. I hope that answered your question.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So still kind of going chronologically, you graduated from SMU. The next thing that I personally can remember, I think there's some time in between then and this, is you ended up teaching a kind of a, I don't know how to describe it, a special ed kind of course?
Yeah, so that came probably about 3 years after graduation. 3 years?
Hmm.
Yeah, that sounds about right. In the interim, I stayed at SMU as a contract laborer for the art department,
Hmm.
and got into a company, Glazers. They're a wholesale distributor. I got into that company with the promise of, hey, do 6 weeks of stocking liquor for us, and then we'll get you into our art department making displays for, different big liquor companies. They pay artists to create sculptures, and I'm like, okay, I could do that. It's booze, it's art, fun. But the guy that hired me was fired like right after I started. And no one was privy to our conversations of being put in the art department.
Hmm.
So all of the sales reps and all of the managers just kind of laughed when I mentioned it. And they're like, do you even know how to operate a dolly? I'm like, yeah. I've moved multiple 100-pound sculptures and equipment with dollies, more than liquor. But when I told them I went to SMU, they just kind of laughed me up and down. I thought, well, this is a dead end.
Yeah.
Even if I do get in the art department, if I have to work for these guys, I don't think it's going to be worth it in the end. So I, kind of absconded overseas for a little bit. I was dating someone overseas and came back and was just looking for something better. Still doing a bunch of the contract stuff. I turned to beer, and that just didn't help, further down the road. And didn't do a whole lot of art. I kind of stopped the art thing. I think my focus was on, having this relationship and thinking I was going to get married to a foreigner and, these very romantic ideas, that I lost focus big time. And I started going back towards the art world when I worked for a framing company and was moving up their corporate ladder when actually my cousin, who also went to SMU, called me and said, would you like to teach an art class at my special needs program? I said, tell me more. This sounds interesting, but I don't know that I'm qualified. So I checked it out and I got in, and at first they just kind of needed me to be kind of like an assistant to the instructors there. And the program was for adults who had aged out of high school. So 18 on up. I think our youngest client, we didn't call them students, our youngest client was 18 and our oldest at the time was 66. Just to give them a place to go. But what they wanted from me was to do art classes, and not just like kitschy arts and crafts things just to keep, keychains, whatever. Those are fine to keep people busy and to teach some manual dexterity skills. But they really wanted to find out who were the artists in this community. And that was actually a big struggle, not for the artists, but for parents, for other teachers and programs involved with our community. Because they thought, wait, why are you trying to teach them fine art? And I said, because clearly these 5 individuals are visual artists. You may think of them as only having autism or Down syndrome, and their parents don't think they only have autism or Down syndrome or cerebral palsy. But they thought, surely, my child isn't that creative. And I said, no, not only does art soothe them, but they are incredible visual artists. This is how they process. And I had one student in particular that, she should have been in museums. She was so gifted. All I did was help her kind of process drawing. I had her copy a lot of the old masters and Renaissance paintings just to see where she was and to see where she gravitated in her output. And she had this ability to, and it could have just been our printer quality, how everything pixelated. But she took that and she pixelated her images. So it was so much more than pointillism, because she would do dots on dots on dots to kind of, stipple her values. And she just did it. If I were to introduce to her a new color theory concept, she'd kind of give me this quizzical look. And I thought, okay, out the window. I'd step away just to let her paint and, process. I'd come back like, holy smokes, you got it.
Yeah.
You did it. You took my poor instruction and turned it into incredible artwork. You're every professor's dream student.
Right.
She was so gifted. And we had several others. I mean, there was one girl who came in, one young woman, not girl. And I was really impressed by the way she painted this landscape. I mean, it was almost like this, just kind of like a Monet, but without all the individual strokes. She just had this incredible movement in how she painted. And I was very moved by it. So when her dad came to pick her up, I pulled him aside and said, did you know how well your daughter can paint? He goes, oh, no, I know she loves art. I said, no, this isn't I love art. This is I know how to paint. And I showed him what she made, and he started to cry. Mm. I thought, all right, I got to go, because I'm going to tear up that this is affecting people this much. So it was really cool. I mean, there had to be varying sides to what I did with my art department because of the government pay. Like, so many hours had to be a day hab based instruction. And so what I did is I used the elements of the arts to teach people hand building skills, manual dexterity, cognitive and memory skills, that kind of thing. And it all had to be tiered per level of understanding or ability. And so that was challenging because I'd never written curriculum. And so I had to draft a curriculum that was art based, but not about art output. Yeah. Because we just didn't have the time or facilities, in my opinion, to like get everyone to make bowls. We tried. We did molds. We did ceramics. We did glass slumping. I mean, we did, and we had the resources to get done whatever we wanted to get done. But every time they would make an educational shift in the program, I'd be the heckler saying, "That's not going to work for us."
Yeah.
Sorry, what I'm being told to do from the uppers isn't going to work from what you middles want.
Yeah, yeah.
But then I had complete freedom in the afternoon to do whatever I wanted. And so I used that time to train artists. You know, we were going to get into the community. We were going to do portfolio building, have group shows, etc. But there were just so many demands coming from every different direction. And I was a yes man. And it was just me. So, you know, we had some help with adding on some other teachers, but they always got pulled in. Another SMU alum came and did music therapy, and she and I developed a showcase. So our visual artists could showcase their work, but then all of our performers could showcase on stage to a live audience. So that was pretty killer too, to be a part of that. Having to be manager and art teacher and facilitator. There's just too many hats. And I was just getting to the point, I had a guy with CP who had very limited range and control in his dominant hand. But I thought, hey, let's try to use painting. I want you to copy this to try to get a little bit more control. So I had to be a little scientific about it, just trying different ways and different methods. And we finally got to a place where he was able to make some impressive calculated strokes. And it got to the point where he was building scenes and landscapes just from shapes, kind of cubist, but not. And they were just beautiful. And I saw, you know, he didn't have this drastic change in motion, but you could tell he was gaining control. And because of that, was gaining confidence.
Yeah.
So he came to art once or twice a week just to hang out and give me a hard time because we could do that. But it was a phenomenal season. You know, I wish I hadn't been such a yes man about everything else and just focused on the art part, because I learned a lot. Yeah. You know, and the attempts to explain something in the aftermath was like, that was so abstract. I don't know who would have understood what I said, but to have these students take that reorganize it like Wonka vision, and then create something spectacular.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
remember
thought, I want to do that.
seeing one of those exhibits. It was pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess starting to turn a little bit more towards your own artistic output, I think I see the map of Middle Earth behind you.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
That's it.
I know that Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, various fantasy things figure pretty heavily in your life. And when I say like heavily, I mean you actually read and remember parts of the Silmarillion kind of
Oh yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like that extra step that most people don't
Yeah.
make it past The Hobbit, right?
I had to learn some Elvish terms in different languages.
And I remember at your senior exhibit, there were some scenes there that were kind of more fantasy oriented in terms of what you're painting. And I know um, like that kind of subject matter has come up. How else does this manifest as you paint?
So, and that's a really pointed question. You're kind of hitting the eye of my current storm. I did a lot of figurative work, and I loved the fantastic. I loved the very romantic scenes that you see in a lot of German and especially French painters. Just striking a pose, and that kind of goes back to my days of my sketchbooks. I love figurative work, from dinosaurs to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Predator to when I finally got into high fantasy, I started drawing, elves and Dunedain and orcs and all that stuff. I even turned in one of those assignments in my freshman year, and I was totally nervous because I thought this isn't fine art, but it fit the criteria of the homework, and the professors were really stoked about it. And I thought, do I bunk this and just go the illustrative route?
Yeah.
That's kind of a part of the problem too. Is as much as I love illustration, I don't want to be known as just a fine arts illustrator or an illustrative fine artist kind of thing. I don't like isms and titles. They tend to pigeonhole me. I get caught up in the minutia of isms. But with a fantasy, it became this all-encompassing aspect. It wasn't just in my art. I found, I was healthy in college, and I found that I liked being physical. I really enjoyed being not necessarily athletic, but I liked fighting. And not to beat the crap out of people. I just enjoyed the movement. I enjoyed the art and the science.
Yeah, we had a couple of lightsaber fights together.
I had several bruises for a long time. I think our friend Allie still has a welt. Drew Vaughn and Nathan also learned quickly, if I remember.
Yeah.
So there was that aspect, and I think wanting to be a good guy, wanting to be the Aragorn, Legolas, or Luke Skywalker, I had to find something to fight for. So I couldn't just go pick a fight because that was a thing to do. Being in the art school, it could have been very easy to lose to a whole bunch of jocks that predominated on campus. But in appreciate wanting to have the good fight, and even that kind of matching up with my faith. What is the good fight? How do we go about that? How do we endure and press on? That kind of led to more study of armor, architecture, weaponry, that kind of thing. Like, how are these things designed? How does that look in art? What can these shapes and designs and patterns evoke? What can they symbolize? In movies, particularly, everything has to be so simplistic and readily recognizable.
Right.
I think a lot of that's kind of transitioned into art in general. Everything has to be immediately recognizable for it to be understood. But what I gained in my painting classes, all my art classes at SMU, and since then, is I don't want it to be easily recognizable. I don't want this to be a symbol. I'm not painting iconography. but I want something to capture the attention that allures and invites an audience in. So there are some symbols, there are some designs that are very good at that. Sorry. And then trying to find out how that could incorporate, whether it's, you know, a surcoat blowing in the wind, or a cape, or is it the pattern on the samurai's armor. I think I've only done one or two of those. You have one.
Yeah.
But trying to think of it as an artist is, okay, what values and what shapes and what colors can I use to invite the audience into my piece? Because ultimately what I want is to give a sense of atmosphere, or a place of belonging, that kind of real intimacy that comes from real spaces, whether you're indoor or outdoor. And I think that was something that grabbed me about Tolkien, is his ability to describe a landscape and to make you feel like you're in an actual landscape while you're reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah.
He doesn't give a lot of description about clothes or about the armor. He doesn't, you know, pull a George R.R. Martin on, and the gilding on the hilt of Oathkeeper. No. He gives evocative expressions or directions of to what something might look like that's worn or held. And when it comes to landscape, he gave you these very almost billowing descriptions of the world around you. Because that's what he was writing about, was saving this world. So for me, that's something that even now, landscapes alone don't cut it. Figures alone don't cut it. You know, I might do a figurative painting or landscape paintings, but to me, there's still something about the two becoming one. There's something about man and his place on earth that is very profound. Mm-hmm. You know, even in our space race, we long to go to Mars, but we were born here.
Yeah, right.
You know, and we have the ability to take care of this place and make it better again. I think we should. So how to evoke that? And I don't do a lot of paintings about, I don't know, contemporary problems as we see it, but evoking contemporary issues into landscapes, whether it's just mountains, if it's, you know, trees. I like adding the little details of fantasy, of a mysterious figure holding a torch. Why a torch? We have flashlights these days, or we have modern lanterns that use LEDs. There's something about fire to me that feels more alive than an LED. Mm-hmm. The LED is far brighter and far more efficient than you know, kerosene-soaked torch. But there's something more romantic and alluring to me about fire. It feels more natural. It feels more integral and still distinct to the landscape. So I'm still working on my narrative. I'm still looking for that one-liner that I can give. Mm-hmm. That's just kind of that evocative image of everything else I'm doing.
Yeah. Because
I think that will help me. It'll, in essence, be like a capstone to why I paint. Because I got stuck in the rut that I had to paint one thing. And that drove me crazy. It did. It's like, well, if I can only paint this one thing, it's like I don't want to be known for this one thing. Would rather be known as a good painter than a good painter of trees.
Oh yeah.
He does trees super well. I'm like, mazel tov, who cares?
Yeah.
That's just one aspect. I want to be known as a good painter. Did I use my colors well? Did I have a strong composition? Did I present what I was conceptualizing in an effective manner? You know, did I draw my audience in? That kind of thing. And not everyone buys that stuff. You know, it's like making art for artists. But yeah, I think for me, that's the greater challenge to rise to.
Yeah, trying to walk that line.
Yeah.
And then there's, I don't know if this sounds, I guess it's probably not insulting, but like there is some overlap too with your faith, because I know you're a big fan of C.S. Lewis, who is also a fantasy writer, sci-fi writer. And you go to I guess it's a synagogue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Messianic synagogue. Jews that believe Jesus is the Messiah. And I'm not Jewish, but, my wife is. And some of my dearest friends are. But it's a place for them to stay culturally Jewish and believe in the Jewish Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
History has not been kind. Anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we're seeing some of that pop up again.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Very strongly.
And I think what's interesting to me about some of the works of yours in the past few years in particular, there are some kind of C.S. Lewis-like paintings. Like some of them are directly, I think, inspired, like a painting of basically Aslan, the lion, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there is one that was very popular of the lamppost and the snowscape.
Yeah, that one, people really wanted that one.
Mm-hmm.
I just had fun painting it.
But I think in the way that C.S. Lewis would write with Christianity kind of, for him, sort of under the surface, with these symbols kind of writing and delivering that message. There's some of your paintings that seem to operate similarly, where you'll see it's a tree in the light. And it's like, and if you don't, as a viewer, know anything about Casey Ray Parrott and his faith, you'd be like, it's a pretty tree in the light. And then understanding more about your biography, you might go, oh, there are some symbolisms and layers to this. How much of this is conscious and how much of it is like just part of how you operate visually and imagistically, do you think?
That's a great question. I'll answer the last question first. For me, I look at everything as a painting. Right now I'm looking at my closet doors in the office, and just what I do is I break it down into shapes and into colors, and I think, what colors would I make to create this? What would I need to do just to replicate what I'm seeing? So just on that first layer of perception and perceiving, the same thing, of perception, is painterly. I'm thinking of brush strokes. I'm thinking of, big brush versus little brush, soft edge, hard edge kind of thing. And that's all just kind of churning on the surface. But then when I sit and meditate, in that process, just think, oh, that's really cool seeing how powerful light is. And that even if it's dark outside, I can still see shapes. I can still perceive. I can still move around. And it just gets me thinking about not necessarily just principles from scripture, but actual verses that talk about light, that talk about space, God as light, the beginnings of creation, that kind of thing. And dabble into that. What does that look like scientifically with what we know? How does that compare? Does it matter? All kinds of those questions. And so through all those ramblings, I start kind of building up images, and I think, what is it that's so powerful about this to me? What is it that strikes me? Conversely, sometimes I think, how can I preach this?
Sure.
And I think sometimes those become the weaker images when I try to get a message across. Hey, aha, look over here,
Yeah.
And those become the most frustrating pieces to make, because I'm not really invested in it. It's not my relationship with God. It's not my relationship with my abilities or my perception. So it takes me out of the game. Some commissions are that way. Yeah. I may be able to give my technical ability, but some commissions still feel flat to me. And that's a personal problem. I don't know how many artists feel that way. So, some people do commissions. I'm like, my God, you're so good. How do you do that? Here, take my brushes, just.
Yeah.
But for the pieces where it's a deep churning, I feel like it's part of the narrative of my life. Those are the ones that are usually the longest to paint because I go through it more, becomes more personal, therefore it's more precious in meaning, not necessarily in output. But I want to convey that. I want to render what I'm seeing and experiencing in a memorable and powerful way, technically, creatively, all that kind of stuff. And that's really where putting in the full effort as an artist comes in. How much research are you putting in? How much understanding of composition, of shape and mass, value, temperature, color? Most people don't think about that. Even people that come off on Instagram, I'm an artist. I'm like, cool, you're drawing. That's great. That's fundamental. That's not everything.
Right.
I want to challenge you to keep going. Don't stop, keep going. Because real artists struggle through all the fundamentals. And so I think in doing that, it's led me to look at other artists and how they create. For one, to look and make sure that before I read any blurb about the art on the wall, like if I'm in a gallery, I want to look at the piece. I want to see how it's made after I've taken the big picture view. I want to come up and say, where are your layers? How have you crafted this image? And then say, I think this is what it means. And then I'll go read the blurb like, aha, okay. I missed it. Or no, I'm right on it. Great. Okay. Yeah. My cognitive abilities are still a little sharp. Because then I can take that back to the studio and really start to wonder, okay, how would this be better layered? Is this a glazing thing? Is this an impasto thing? And where would these techniques fall in the painting that are going to make the focal piece an actual epicenter? I don't want to just be like, hey, that's nice, but I want to be like, whoa, I'm feeling everything being affected because of this right here. Yeah. So I think doing that, and for me, it's kind of like with Tolkien, it's the scenes, it's the land and the landscape in which God operates through the scriptures. You have these very powerful images in the Old Testament and the New Testament of God as these different things. We have the typical images that become super trite, like a lion, which when I did Aslan, I thought, I don't want it to feel like, hey, it's a lion, good guy. I want it to feel like, hey, this is kind of scary. Yeah. There's even a line where he says, good, yes, but not safe. He's not safe. We're there in the Psalms particularly, because that is art within scripture. They are strictly poems that refer back to the scripture that they had at that time. Most of which was just relating back to the creation story of Genesis. Right. So you have these very beautiful images, and then how these writers processed that same literature in their time and how it affected them and what they were able to craft. So even mine is still kind of derivative of their derivation of the actual text. But to get back to that and say, hey, I want to be like these guys, these psalmists. I might not be writing something, but I'm creating a virtual poem here for people to experience that depth of relationship with God. And I think there's some paintings where I've been able to break through. I think when someone has a positive, I think mostly emotional response. I don't think that we give emotions much credit in our society unless it's negative, and that's a shame. But I remember painting one. It was right after I left my job teaching special needs adults. I left because my wife got pregnant, and we were expecting our first baby girl. I needed to stay home. And so I had a solo show just a month before all that was supposed to happen, and I quickly had to scramble and paint some oil paintings for this last-minute show. I don't recommend to anybody, but it happened, man. But I painted this piece, and I just remember being so impressed by the movie Interstellar. And I just was just thinking, what's a striking image? And I just felt like I was being jettisoned out of the known world into, to quote Elsa, into the unknown. Which is very scary. I remember feeling the same thing at the end of college. Like, I don't know up from down. I don't know left from right. I feel like I'm in space. So when I caught that, I said, no, wait, this is similarly known territory. You know, to know not what to expect. Right. Let's move on. And so I painted this kind of jet stream, the rocket trail, leaving the atmosphere and going into space. And I just had this gradation of blues following that. It just got deeper and deeper and darker, scarier and scarier as the jet stream went vertical. And the jet stream went off the canvas, which they tell you, never do that. Never have a line go off the canvas. I'm like, screw you. I'm going to do it anyway. Because that's what my painting's about, dang it. And I loved it. That for all the pieces that I did for that particular solo show, that was the one that I think my wife even said, she goes, this is the path you need to follow. This kind of thinking, this kind of processing, this kind of creating. And then a fellow musician, fellow artist, I mean, he's one of the most gifted musicians I've ever met in our congregation. I didn't see it, but his mom said, so when he looked at your painting, he just cried. And she said, I need to buy it for him so that he can have that, just because it helped him in his music. And I thought, oh man, I mean, that's a blessing that my art could be something that inspires someone that good, right? In his music career. And that came from just my personal journey of, I need to leave where I'm at and go into the unknown. And that's a beautiful image for anybody, which is really cool, is that it can be a beautiful image for anybody. But for someone who's in the same faith, they know that the unknown is really God. This great expanse of, we know so little of who he is. We know his character. We know he's trustworthy and all that. But, the older you get, trust becomes scarier and scarier. Or I'll say it this way, it costs more and more, I think. Yeah. And so to catch that kind of depth, I don't know if it's possible, but I want to try. Yeah. I want to try to catch that. Exactly. And I'm not there yet. And I think that's what makes me mad, is that I'm not there yet. Go figure, Mr. Impatient over here. But that's my aim, is to evoke that sense of presence, that sense of atmosphere. If you go back to even like Thoreau, and just how poetic he got about God, and then really just about nature. But he got poetic about God because of nature at first, the way that he would talk about the deity and everything. It's pretty cool, and it's a nice segue for me. It's like, that's great, but because of what I believe in an actual person with a name who lived on this planet. It becomes a little different than just the ethereal. And then I think even that, going, okay, well, if Jesus is God, how to get from that mundane of human to the expanse of eternal. This fish swims through the ocean, but the ocean also swims through the fish, kind of deal. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's, again, I'm still exploring how all that works, but there's something about the landscape. There's something about the natural that is so scary to us, and that's known, but also how to evoke the element of the unknown in that. Yeah. We don't face cosmic storms, and our atmosphere protects us from solar flares, but my God, what would happen if they didn't? Yeah. Exactly. Whoa.
Well, believe it or not, we're actually coming up on time. So
Whoa.
I'm going to end with something that actually worked pretty well in my last interview. On the count of 3, who's the first artist who jumps to your head? 3, 2, 1.
Da Vinci.
Da Vinci. Why Da Vinci?
I don't know, because I think I was just thinking of him. his draftsmanship is just unmatched.
Hmm.
Close to unmatched. There's some other really good draftsmen. But I think it's how he thought of the world and how he imagined things to be. He would observe the human figure and think, I think it looks like this on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And then would look at a corpse, on an examining room table. That is how it looked on the inside. Okay. But then he would take that to inventions, where there was the submarine, machine guns, flying machines. Futurama did a great commentary on all that.
Mm-hmm.
But at a time when imagination wasn't upheld, you painted what your patrons wanted you to paint, and you did it their way. He stuck it to them. He spent a majority of his time perfecting one image. Good for him, but she's this big.
Yeah.
But his striving for that for his own personal work, his ability to imagine and craft, and for those drawings to remain intact and to be as powerful as they are to the art community, to the science community even. And that's just incredible. I mean, Vitruvian Man.
Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, it's just a beautiful image.
Mm-hmm.
But also some of his other paintings. He did paintings of apocryphal scenes. So, but the brilliance of them is that he left them unfinished.
Yeah.
And for that day and age, that was taboo. Nowadays, it's like that's a particular kind of genius to be able to say, I can't do anything else to this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to leave it and just let its state affect the viewer. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
So
cool. All right. Well, I guess that'll wrap it up. Thanks for sitting down to talk with me and share your thoughts for whoever watches this or reads it, because there will be a transcript.
Oh, cool.
Closed captions and all the rest of that. Yeah. So thanks for stopping by.
Thank you, Adam. It's been a pleasure talking with you again.
Sure thing.